Welcome back, everyone. This is Tucker. Let's talk weather. It's the month with the most tornadoes in the entire year, also known for its volatile weather and big-time temperature swings. I'm breaking down the forecast for May 2025 with the craziest weather you'll find anywhere in the world. Welcome to the last month of spring, everyone. It's one of my favorite months of the year because days get longer, temperatures get warmer, and I'm always in awe of the severe weather that we get, especially in the US this month of the year. It really is the most crazy month of weather that you'll find anywhere in the world. I wanted to start our forecast for May 2025 with a look back at some of the recent years and the severe weather that we've seen in this month. This chart depicts the forecasts from the Storm Prediction Center, which give us a good idea of how active the weather was. And as you can see, starting with May 2024, last year, we had an incredibly active month of severe storms and tornadoes. In fact, we had more enhanced risk days, those orange boxes, or higher than anything else. In fact, May 6th was even a high risk day, and we had 5 other moderate risk days. Moderate risks are level 4 out of 5, high risks 5 out of 5, and nothing below a slight risk, level 2 out of 5. So an incredibly active May 2024. The year before that was not the same. May 2023, in fact, not only did we not have a single moderate risk day, most days were simply slight risks. We even had 4 days that were just marginal risks, a level 1 out of 5. The year before that, May 2022, this was more typical of what you'd find in May. Active weather, a good blend of slight risk and enhanced risk days, level 2s and 3s out of 5, and a few moderate risk days thrown in there as well. Certainly not abnormal for this time of year. If we go back a year further, this is May 2021. Not atypical, a little quieter, a few moderate risk days, a few marginal risk days, and a lot of slight enhanced risks in between. And then 4 years prior, take a look at this. This was right in the middle of the pandemic, if you remember. It was a very quiet year for severe weather, at least a very quiet May for severe weather. In fact, we had 3 marginal risk days and not a single moderate risk day. And while May 6th, 2024 was a high risk day, we did not even have a marginal risk for severe weather. Very unusual, as you can tell, for the month of May, and certainly far more level 2 risks than 3s or higher. So the month of May can really vary a lot in terms of severe weather, but we're going to talk about what you should be preparing for in this month. By the way, guys, if you're not already subscribed, be sure to do so. I do regular weather updates to keep you ahead of severe storms. We're going to be keeping an eye on everything in this busy month, and whenever we have outbreaks, I go live here on YouTube to keep you up to date with the latest. We're going to take a look now at who is at greatest risk in any given May for severe weather. And what you can see as we begin the month is our bullseye right here around the south central US. Now, as we go through the month, you're going to see that bullseye expand and also begin to migrate to the north and west. And we even get a secondary bullseye to develop across portions of the eastern US out here. And here's where we are towards the end of the month now. 2 separate severe weather bullseyes, but especially this one out here across classic Tornado Alley. That's where the best chance for any kind of severe weather is as we get through the month of May. We can break this down further though, looking at individual severe weather threats. This is your damaging wind risk. And as you can see, it's a little more broad, that risk for damaging wind. It's not so bullseyed somewhere in the country. And as we go through the month of May, you're seeing this risk really just continue to broaden out and expand. Once again, we see very clearly here 2 separate bullseyes, one here in the south central US, and we see another bullseye begin to develop in the eastern US, even sneaking into the northeastern region too. As we go through the month of May, damaging wind, it's a threat for everyone, and we certainly see that even to the east. Taking a look at the hail threat, you can see a clear bullseye here in the south central US, and as we go through the month, you're going to begin to see that also migrate pretty far to the north and west across the United States as we get into late May. We see a secondary bullseye try to develop here, but it really doesn't. It is primarily the north central US down through the south central US that is our hail capital, more or less. And if you've seen any pictures of massive hailstones in the late spring or summer, they're almost always in this corridor here from South Dakota down into North Texas. So no huge surprise, that is where our largest hail is in terms of a threat. And the holy grail of all severe weather, tornadoes, which clearly have a bullseye here right around Oklahoma City as we begin the month of May. That really is our tornado capital of the world. And as we continue through the month, you're going to, similarly to what we saw before, see that threat shift to the north and west. And what we end up seeing is not a secondary bullseye out east, but a very broad area of a tornado threat with two separate enhancements within this area. What you're seeing, of course, is one enhancement out here closer to the Great Lakes region and another enhancement in Colorado, which, by the way, this is all classic Tornado Alley. This is when that portion of the country really begins to shine. But our enhancement across the Great Lakes is largely because when we get storm systems cutting across the United States, you get a lot of tornadoes that form on warm fronts, and those will be bowing out to the east of that storm core. Also, Colorado has this interesting type of terrain setup where you can get enhanced spin, especially in the lower parts of the atmosphere, and you can develop some weak tornadoes called landspouts more efficiently. So that's likely why we have that extra enhancement heading into the state. But certainly Tornado Alley, like I said, shines, and of course that's what we're focusing on in terms of our forecast for this May and severe weather risks. We take a look now at some of the weather model data forecasting where severe weather is going to be most likely this May. And we start here with one of the models that, to be honest, I don't put a ton of stock into, but it gives us a decent idea of what we can expect through at least the first 2/3 of the month. And what you're seeing is actually nothing spectacular, but we do have a pretty normal area being painted as the bullseye for severe storms in May, with a little bit of an enhancement near Oklahoma and Kansas. Again, nothing groundbreaking here, but it gives us an idea of what we can expect. And honestly, all things considered, it's basically saying this looks like a pretty normal May. Nothing stands out entirely. And I'm going to give you a closer look at some of the details in our forecast that you're not going to get from this model. But that's just what it's showing us. Here's the same model displaying the data in a different way. And I know this looks confusing, so let me break it down for you. It's actually incredibly cool. But we have our white line here separating everything from the past forecasts, which is on the left side of your screen, and everything on the right are your future days in the forecast. So it's a really interesting way to forecast the data. More or less, where you have those brighter colors, that's suggestive of a broader area with severe weather potential. Where you have those bluer colors, that's where you have less severe weather potential. And basically what we have on the bottom here is time. So the farther you go to the right out here, the farther ahead in the future you go. The farther you go to the left, the farther in the past you go. I'll put my little marker here so you can see the difference again here. And more or less, as we go through time, a day gets forecasted more and more often. So every forecast in a column here is for the same day. The forecasts near the top are the most recent. And the way I'm reading this map here, based on the data that we're getting from the CFS model, is quieter weather is more likely to be favored through the first half of May. That's why we have that sort of big blue bullseye there. That's saying, you know, severe weather, it looks more likely to be quieter than average through the first part of the month. And I do believe there may be something to that, which we're going to talk about in depth here in a second. But if we separate this first half of May and the second half, you see a lot more of these bright colors in the second half of May and even into the start of June. That's suggestive of weather that is on par or perhaps more active than normal. So if you're looking for severe weather potential, it seems more likely here that it would be backloaded in the month of May. After the first half, even after the first 2/3 are perhaps over, it picks back up again. Let me now get into why that may be and get you prepared for what I expect is going to occur this month. Now I'm going to show you what I've been looking at, and while it may look complicated, I'm going to break down the science for you and explain how it relates to the severe weather potential. And what we're looking at here is the upper air pattern. Those orange colors indicate ridges, typically bringing warmer and sunnier weather. The blue colors indicating troughs, typically bringing cooler and stormier weather. Now, the stormier weather doesn't always directly lead to severe weather, and we have a great example coming up here. You can see this storm system across the southwestern U.S., but because it's so compact and closed off, that's not really a good producer for severe weather most of the time. And while you could get some storms to start things off here in the south central US, we're going to see an interesting weather pattern begin to evolve in the middle of the month here, or at least the early middle. So we'll call it the beginning of the second week of May. We have what's known as a Rex block. And a Rex block is when you have a high pressure system directly over a low pressure system, and your jet stream gets all tangled up. You know, it keeps on going to the west, and then it gets pulled back a little bit to the south, and it keeps going to the east rather. It gets pulled back to the south and west, and then it continues going east. And when you get this tangled up jet stream, you really slow everything down. And because this low pressure system here is cut off, it's unlikely to produce much severe weather. And if it does, it's really low end. And you're not going to get severe weather with the high pressure system here. And you're not going to get anything downstream because the jet stream is cut off. You don't get that wind energy. And Rex blocks can last a little while too. And we can continue to see signs of this even into the middle of the month. Now, it does loosen up once we get towards about the second half, and I believe that's why some of our data has been suggestive of a quieter first half. What you can see here is a little more favorable for severe weather. You have your trough sort of cutting into the western US, but it's not cut off, and you'd end up getting likely a stronger jet across the central US towards the middle of the month. This says to me that, mid-May we could see more activity. Once we get towards the end of the month, one of the questions will be, once again, do we get another kind of Rex block? We have high pressure up here. We got low pressure down here. It's something to keep an eye on nonetheless. But as we get towards the end of the month here, this is becoming a more favorable pattern, what you can see here. So the end of May actually could be more active for severe weather. We have this trough in the western US. We have this ridge closer to the eastern US. This really helps get that jet stream going through the central part of the country, and that's what drives severe weather right here. So more favorable towards the third and, the end of the third and especially the fourth week of the month. And what we're seeing right here, again, is quite favorable. You have that pretty deep trough out west, and as long as the ridge doesn't position itself too far east, you would get some severe weather, especially out here across the Great Plains. This would be a great plains setup for severe storms. That's one of our models. I'll show you the other one here, and we'll keep this one a bit more simple. But this is the first week of the month. Again, you can see pretty clearly you have your Rex block, high pressure to the north, and your ridge to the north, and a trough to the south. And again, that is going to tangle up the jet stream, likely keep things quiet to begin the month. Once we get into the middle of the month, we still have some suggestion that we could have that Rex block in place, which would jam things up and keep things quiet. But here's where we begin to see things get more favorable again. Some question marks here. We may have a trough here that would help eject some storms through the middle of the country. My question is, does this end up becoming a ridge that cuts things off? And I've seen that in some of our models, so it's not a slam dunk that the later days of May will be the most active. I do think it's a better pattern, but we will have to watch for this potential ridge. If it's too strong, it will continue to cut off severe weather chances, but I don't believe it's going to completely do that yet. And then as we get towards the very end of the month and the start of June, still not seeing any suggestion of super high severe weather, but likely more average. This setup isn't perfect. It's not horrible. You still have some ridging out east. You got a little bit of ridging in the southwest, which suggests to me that your most likely severe weather events are going to still be in the plains, but are going to end up a bit farther north. So if anything, what I'm seeing is a likelihood for more severe weather than normal in the northern plains region, but I don't expect anything crazy. Now, what about temperatures? And how do the maps that we just looked at relate? Well, in the same breath, we can actually sort of pick out some of the trends here. And like you saw before, we have a lot of that ridging, especially in the north central US. This is where I believe the best chance for warmer than average weather will be. Meanwhile, you can tell we do have a decent bit of troughing in the south and west and central US. That is where I believe our temperatures are more likely to be cooler than average. And as we go through the month, you can more or less see that trend playing out. Also, on our other weather model, I'll just give you an overview here. We saw that very clearly once again. We're looking at the end of the month here, but as I reset this, there's your ridging across the northern US and even into the east as well. And you have your troughing out here in the south and central US. And as we get later into the month, you still more or less see that trend playing out until the very end. But with that, I do expect we're going to see an early summer if you're in the north central US, and it may be a bit delayed if you're in the southwest or south central, which isn't a bad thing because I do know it gets pretty darn hot down there. Also tied into this is the potential for rainfall. Where you have those troughs, you have a better chance for rain. And as we go through the beginning of the month, you can see we're certainly looking at that chance for rain to be greatest where we have some of that troughing. And also across the East Coast, there is a secondary bullseye out there. Our high pressure system in the middle of the country likely to keep things a bit drier to begin the month. As we get later into the month, we may see things flip-flop a little bit. Obviously, the signal isn't as strong, so we're looking farther out, but we're still looking at some dryness, especially across the north-central U.S. Still maybe a bit wetter than average on the East Coast. That's a signal to watch. And we still have that wetter than average forecast across portions of the south central and even the mountain west. And as we get later to the month, that's where things may flip-flop a little bit. You can see a little bit of wetter weather out here, perhaps a little bit of dry weather out here. The East Coast still sticking with the generally wetter forecast, though, even late into May. And into June, this is a little more fuzzy, so I wouldn't hedge too much on that. But my forecast would more or less be drier than normal conditions across a good chunk of the north central U.S., the Great Lakes region, and wetter than average, sort of straddling the south and east coastlines here. So something sort of like this, basically going around that high pressure system and staying to the south and east. That's where most of our storm systems, I believe, that'll bring rain are going to be this month. That's where you're going to expect a little more than normal. While I feel confident in my forecast, I always like to show what some of the experts over at NOAA are suggesting in their forecasts as well. And actually for this May, we match up pretty well. They're forecasting generally warmer than average conditions across the U.S., especially in the area that we were talking about in the north central U.S., largely due to the fact that it appears ridging is going to be a bit more notable and more steady too. We certainly have still above average warmth across most of the eastern U.S. as well. Most of the country warmer than average. Really nowhere actually they're listing as colder than average, although I believe we may see some of that cooler weather than suggested out here at least. But they at least have the equal chances as opposed to warmer than average. And in terms of precipitation, again, actually, very similar to what I was thinking too. Oftentimes I find I agree with them, sometimes not so much, but this month, more than most, I would agree with this forecast. Again, these guys are really good at what they do, so that is usually a good sign. And you can see the drier than average conditions they're expecting across the Great Lakes region, the north central U.S. Their area of driest weather, I believe, is a little bit farther east than what I would put it. I might have something more like this, but still very similar. And the weather than average conditions, very similar to what we were talking about here too. A little bullseye here by the Mountain West, that makes sense to me. A certain bullseye here in the south central U.S., that makes sense as well. Again, if it was me, I would certainly put a little extra something out here on the East Coast. Again, they don't have anything drier, they just have equal chances, but that's really the biggest disagreement I have with them, and that's not a lot. So as you can tell, May shaping up to be a interesting month on a few different layers, but especially that the temperatures in the north central U.S. may really hit early. And on some occasions, I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at more summer-like weather in somewhere like the Dakotas than even somewhere like Oklahoma or Kansas. And we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But I wouldn't be surprised, especially towards the early and middle of the month, if we do see that play out a little bit. All right, guys, make sure to drop your questions in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, what kind of weather you're hoping for, and make sure to check back as we continue to update you every other day with the regular forecast discussion. I'll put a little bit of educational stuff on here too, but be sure to check back. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, and I'll see you back here next time.